Start the meeting. The first thing on the agenda is HB 777. Is Chairman Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At least it's not 666, is it? So 7 is a lucky number, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is a repealing of the historic Chattahoochee Commission. It was a compact that spans some 30-some-odd years with the state of Alabama. And this morning, the state of Alabama did away with the compact in the state of Alabama, and that's what we're trying to do as well. Money became a problem. Alabama stopped funding, so we followed suit. No funding came from us, and therefore they have asked that we do away with it and repeal it, take it off the book. We had to check to make sure there was no monies owed anywhere, bonds or anything, and there was not. And so I bring you this House Bill 777 for the repealing of the historic Chattahoochee Commission.
Okay, it's a little cleanup language. Any questions from the committee? I don't see any. You're recognized. Okay. Motion second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all members of the committee.
Okay. Next, we have a House Resolution 943 by Representative Morris. If you could, you can stay right where you're sitting and tell the committee a little bit about your resolution.
The resolution to deal with an issue that's been going on in our state this year marks the 200th anniversary of how we have physically marked the boundaries of the states of Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. All of our respective constitutions define that this border in question is the 35th parallel. The physical border on it is actually marked about a mile south of that. This started in 1818 and has been going on ever since. The first error was noted 8 years later in 1826 by the person that one of the people, Mr. Kammick. It was Kammick and Gaines that outlined this, that outlined the border. Unfortunately, they started out in very hostile territory. They started out with faulty equipment, and they started out in the wrong place. So it was kind of deemed to be problematic from the beginning. So during that time, we've made multiple attempts to resolve this. Tennessee has accepted the 35th parallel as its southern border in other places. A good example is in 1890, where the state of Mississippi was laying out its borders, and Tennessee challenged them and basically forced them to correct that border. So the 35th parallel is recognized. So it's time to deal with this, to put it to bed. Yes, there are certainly advantages and disadvantages in this. It's 51 miles long, it's a mile deep, and there are 30,000 approximately people that identify themselves as Tennesseans that live in that area right now that are below the 35th parallel. So it's time to get together, get the joint, get a committee with the Georgia joint and with joint committee between the House and the Senate, engage North Carolina, engage Tennessee to resolve this once and for all.
Thank you. Any questions? Questions? Is there anybody here from the audience that wanted to speak on this? Okay. All right. And I don't know if this is currently the case, but does the state of Georgia not extend to this area in question, like in-state tuition and Hope Scholarship eligibility for people in this area?
Currently, I don't know the answer to that question.
I think we did. I think we did do that a few years ago. Okay. We have a question over here.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess the reason I heard Representative Morris talk about 200 years, and I was just concerned that is this an anniversary event, one, or two? Is it just for 200 years this has been going on, and all of a sudden we want to do something about it? I'm just concerned is that we're not going to get any more water, or
Well, if you look at the issues, you know, we have an increased population in Metro Atlanta and in Georgia. We have increased needs for water in the rural areas of Georgia. Currently, there are about, depending on who you believe, 1 billion to 1.5 billion gallons of water that flow out of Georgia into the Tennessee River. The Tennessee Valley Authority makes power with that water. They sell it back to Georgia, and they keep the water. I think if we just got the water back that came from us, we certainly, it would nearly solve the water problems, certainly solve Metro Atlanta's. It would nearly solve the problems between the water wars in Alabama and Florida as well. And so if you look at the 35th parallel at Lake Nickajack, the 35th parallel runs right through the center of the lake. Okay, it's clearly inside the borders of Georgia. So if we look at it from a water aspect, this then allows us in a position to go to the TVA and say, hey, half your lake's in our state, so you know we need a little water back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is certainly not the first effort we've done in trying to rectify the state line issue. Another question, Representative Stovall, is that you? Is that you, Dick? Oh, Jeff. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Morris, we've talked about this on a couple of occasions, and I have been intrigued by your explanations of this centuries-old issue and problem. One of the things you mentioned is that we've got people who are residing in what would become Georgia. So I guess my question is, how do we deal with the downsides of disrupting those citizens who currently identify themselves as Tennesseans?
We get to the table and we start having conversations, and that's what it allows us to do. Once we get all parties to the table, I'm sure we can work this out in some way that doesn't displace 30,000 people who probably, for maybe even decades or even centuries, that have identified themselves as Tennesseans. So by getting together and finally bringing a resolution to the border, that solves that problem, because these people, quite honestly, are at risk right now. If we end up in a lawsuit, you know, potentially they could find themselves with 200 years of back taxes. Now, I'm just kidding, of course, I'm just kidding. But, you know, it is time to bring it to bed. This is the bicentennial of this event, and I think it needs to be corrected.
But just to follow up quickly,
Yeah.
If there is a downside, is it indeed the fact that we're going to change the state citizenship of those folks from Tennessee to Georgia? Is that the practical application of this change?
I think the practical application would be for us to agree that to ratify the border as it's currently drawn by Gaines and Kammack in 1818. That keeps those people in line or in Tennessee that have for long believed they lived in Tennessee. However, I think we do need to work out the issue of the asset that we're donating to the Tennessee River on a daily basis and how we're going to handle that. So the good news is there's 51 miles there, and I think we can be very flexible on 49 and a half of them. We just simply need access to the river. And I think that is not to take anything that's not already ours, but to reintroduce the water back into Georgia that has flown into that river.
So one more follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So then are you saying that you're not necessarily, again, the commission would work out these details, I realize, and your resolution is to form that commission so folks can discuss this, but is it your supposition perhaps that we're going to end up negotiating the water issue and perhaps leave citizens who are identifying themselves as Tennesseans as such, or I'm asking you to kind of look at the crystal ball looking ahead as to how you think this might all resolve?
Well, as a native Georgian, I could never understand why anybody wouldn't want to be a Georgian, okay? But I think there's a lot of room and flexibility for what can be done in the future. But until the parties get to the table and hammer that out, nothing can be done, quite honestly. We have never, there's three components to ratifying the border. The first is that Tennessee would have to ratify their border as it was drawn originally in 1818. Georgia would have to ratify that border, and then the federal government would have to ratify it. So far, in the last 200 years, the only people that have done that is Tennessee. Georgia has never accepted. We paid for the survey. We received the maps. We never ratified the border. The federal government has never ratified the border. And I don't think we want to be unkind to anyone, but this is an open issue out here that does need to come to closure. There's a benefit for all parties concerned in that. And, you know, look, there's a lot of land there that is seen as suburban or metro Chattanooga, and I don't think those people no longer want to be in Tennessee. But I think until we get all the people together, that's about the only way that we can bring it to a resolve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, you mentioned here the commission shall meet with similar commissions of the General Assembly of the State of North Carolina and Tennessee. How do we bring them to the table?
Well, the first thing is we need authorization to do that. And so once we have formed this joint commission, we can engage them and officially request that they put together similar commissions.
Okay.
Now, the governor of the great state of Tennessee has been on record of saying that he's never been officially engaged on this matter. So I think it's time to create a vehicle, which would be this, which would be this resolution, to go and officially engage him on it.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Do we have a motion? Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All right. There's one more item on the agenda, but I spoke with the author, and due to the schedule today with us meeting a little bit later than we thought we might, he had a prior commitment, couldn't be with us today, but I do intend to have a hearing on that, so be on the lookout for that. That'll probably be early next week, and that's House Resolution 944, but we will have a meeting on that. And with that, I don't think we have any more business. So thank you the members for their timely arrival